Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us here today. My name is Sarah Baldeo, and I am a member of the Emerging Leaders Network Executive Committee. I'm also one of the executive directors at Deloitte in the systems engineering practice. Whether you are a returning ELN member, a new member, or someone just curious about the event tonight, we're happy to have you here with us. So just to go over the agenda, I'll be speaking a few minutes on some housekeeping items and setting the stage, and then you will hear from our incredible panel of leaders from the arts and culture sector. We've saved about 20 minutes to answer your questions, so don't forget to add them to the Q&A box, which is at the bottom of your screen. So before we begin, I'd obviously like to take a moment to acknowledge that the land I am on today and from which Civic Action works, we recognize that with virtual events, folks may be joining us from different parts of our region and beyond. So please let us know where you're joining from today in the chat. Civic Action acknowledges that the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area is situated upon traditional and current Indigenous territories that include the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabeg, Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation. We believe in the spirit of the dish with one spoon concept, that land can be shared to the mutual benefit of all its inhabitants. Today, the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area is still home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, North America, and we recognize the historical oppression and inequalities that they continue to face. We also recognize the non-settlers and the displanted, such as people of African descent who were brought here forcibly and enslaved, and who continue to face oppression and inequality on land that is not their own. Depending on our ancestry, we each have different relationships to the land on which we live. In our role as a civic convener and in the spirit of reconciliation, Civic Action is committed to rebuilding and renewing respectful relationships between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. We support Indigenous sovereignty, and we support the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. Now, I'm sure many of us are Zoom pros by now, but I just wanted to take a moment to go through the features of this Zoom webinar that we are on tonight. As you listen to the panel, we encourage you to add your questions for the panelists to the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. You can also see the questions that other attendees have submitted and upvote the questions you want most to see asked. If you want to chat with other attendees or share links or troubleshoot, you can also use the chat box. You can reach out to the Civic Action staff through the chat if you're having any technical issues whatsoever. Closed captioning is available for this event, and you can access it by clicking on live transcript at the bottom of your screen. Now, for our new members here tonight, I'd like to welcome you warmly to the network and take a couple minutes just to share more about Civic Action and the ELN with you. The ELN is a program of the Civic Action Leadership Foundation, which is built on the belief that there is nothing more important to the future of our communities than preparing those who will lead them. As Civic Action convenes, collaborates, and co-creates new solutions for better, more inclusive cities, we call on leaders from all sectors and backgrounds to join us. The Emerging Leaders Network connects, develops, and really activates from a wide range of rising leaders from across the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area. It was created in 2006, and the ELN now represents over 3,000 rising leaders from a wide range of backgrounds, communities, and sectors. The ELN is completely free to join for anyone who identifies as a rising leader or aspiring leader within their sector or community. And members get access to free monthly programming on topics related to things like city building, civic issues, and leadership development. The ELN strategic goals, programming, and communication are supported by the ELN Executive Committee, where I sit as a programming lead. Now, since the beginning of the pandemic, we have taken our programming online, obviously, where we offer things like webinars, discussion groups, mentorship, and panels such as the one we're here on tonight. We are absolutely thrilled to be hosting tonight's event in partnership with Music Canada, which represents Canada's major record labels and advocates for a healthy and vibrant Canadian music ecosystem. Now, we wanted to have this timely conversation as our region begins to look towards pandemic recovery, which is hugely important. The arts play an absolutely pivotal role in our communities, culture, and economy. And yet, arts and culture has been one of the hardest hit industries during the COVID-19 pandemic. According to the Toronto Foundation's Toronto's Vital Signs 2021 report, 70% of arts organizations reported lower revenues in the last 2 years, and 60% believe that the pandemic has affected their long-term sustainability. When considering that many of those who work in the industry are gig workers and 1 of every 4 employees from arts, entertainment and recreation lost their jobs in 2020, it's absolutely clear that the sector took a serious hit over the last 2 years. Tonight, we will explore the recovery of the sector and the crucial role that arts and culture plays in strengthening our regional economy and building better, more inclusive communities across the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area. We are thrilled to have such an incredible panel of industry leaders here to share their perspectives. And tonight, we are so fortunate to be joined by, and I apologize in advance if I have butchered anyone's name. Patrick Rogers is the CEO of Music Canada. Patrick joined Music Canada in 2016 with the goal of innovating their advocacy strategy. In that time, Music Canada and the charge, Patrick led the charge in reforming the Copyright Board of Canada, advocated for an improved Ontario Music Investment Fund, and rallied cultural industry stakeholders during the parliamentary review of the Copyright Act. Next, we have Wayne Mengesha, the artistic director of Soul Pepper Theatre Company and an award-winning director known for her groundbreaking work and community engagement. Wayne has directed shows in Canada and beyond that have gone on tour nationally and internationally and have been developed into television shows playing on CBC, Global, and even Netflix. She has been an instructor at the National Theatre School of Canada and the Canadian Film Centre and was co-artistic director of the Artists Mentoring Youth Project. Finally, we have Bijou Papachan, the executive director of POV Film, an organization that trains and prepares diverse talent from across the Greater Toronto area for meaningful careers in content production. Bijou was also a 2019 Civic Action Diverse City Fellow. The panel will be moderated by Jamil Clark Deshand, the manager of Executive Office of Artscape, where she spends her days advocating for the importance of arts and culture in the region, encouraging the organization to find new ways to create a more inclusive and diverse arts community. Jamil is also a current Civic Action Diverse City Fellow. Thank you all for being here, and please join me in welcoming our panel to the virtual stage. Over to you, Jamil.
Thanks so much, Sarah. And thanks to all three of you guys for being here today. And we don't have a lot of time, so let's just jump right into this really meaty subject. It's really been 2 years. It's been a long 2 years. And maybe I want to start off this conversation with a little bit of reflection and hopefully a bit of positivity. The creative sector, it's known for its adaptability, versatility, resilience. And I would love to hear, if you have any stories to share about how, the pandemic has forced us to pivot in so many ways. But maybe you can speak a little bit about those pivots in your sector, and share a little bit about maybe the good things that have sort of come out of it, innovations or stories of resilience. So does anyone want to take the first stab at it? So polite. Wayne? Sorry to pick on you.
No worries. Yeah, I mean, as you say, yes, we're a resilient community and we had to be creative for sure. I think there's a lot of great things. We have to find the positive things ultimately. I would say democratization and accessibility, because we had to go digital for the theater. And we all of a sudden had people tuning in from all over the world. We also considered programming internationally quite quickly. Like it made us, obviously the interconnectedness of this global pandemic made us really consider people from all over the world, and the stories. Our audience just all of a sudden became global, and that was a great thing for our sector to do, to think about that, to think about how our work translates internationally. Soul Pepper did a program called Around the World in 80 Plays, and we looked at, as a classical, traditionally a classical company, as we were founded, we thought about what are those classics in other countries, and we went to 11 different countries and found artists to work with and interviewed artists and got to partner with CBC and did a whole radio experience where CBC then did documentary and all those pieces. So it just made us sort of look outwards and open up our doors, beyond even the country that we're in and the city that we're in. So that was really positive. I think, and then we will retain those skills that we had to learn very quickly. And I think it will always just continue to have a conscious understanding of our place in the world and how we can continue to support artists and to promote artists internationally.
Thanks, Wayne. Bijou, Patrick, similar stories. I know the digitization has been a big trend. Any stories you'd like to share?
For the content production sector, content was king during the pandemic, and everybody wanted content of any kind. And so what really came to light at that time was the folks who were creating that content didn't really represent the communities that we were in and that we were serving. And so that conversation became very, very important and prevalent over the pandemic, with the Black Lives Matter movement and many other things since. And what's cool about it is that it kind of accelerated, I think, government, the industry at large, and communities as whole. Communities have been advocating for so long to have a voice at the table, to finally get that. The industry to finally say, okay, we realize, we all knew there was a problem, but we now finally can acknowledge that there is a problem, and we want to try and figure out how to do something about it. And the government that said, hey, the pandemic has really restricted a lot of different sectors. Is this a cool opportunity for us to train and retool and reskill some folks into these industries and give folks who've been marginalized from these industries a voice, through giving them technical training, through giving them social supports, through providing them access to economic opportunities that, all of our industries, music, theater, content production, we're big contributors to the GDP of Canada, and yet the people that are benefiting from it aren't those groups. And so this really accelerated that process and put attention to it. So it's a really cool, positive thing that came from, I think, the years and years of people doing really, really hard work in getting this to the forefront. And I think the pandemic and the flexibility we got of how we used our time allowed us to sort of accelerate that attention and accelerate that process.
Yeah, I would second a lot of that. I think I'll think back to the pandemic in two ways. One, we did a lot of research at the very beginning about what people were missing. And what people were missing was music. And that was, we kind of knew that in our heart, but we never asked anybody. We never had any reason to check in on that. And so it was great to check in and hear that, like, yeah, people miss concerts. The average Canadian wants to go, whether it's to a mega concert or to their local bar. They want to do that, and they look forward to getting back to that. And that gave us a lot of hope during some of the really dark days of the pandemic. And then, I would echo a lot of the, social awakening stuff as well. I mean, we started working with Advance, the Black Music Collective, and providing a lot of support, both financial as well as, operational advice. And that's, that'll be something tangible that when all this is over and we're, hopefully, gathering for music and live events again, Advance will be an organization that'll be focused with their own priorities, their own structure. That'll be good for, the after times, which are hopefully sooner than later.
Totally agree. And I think the question that comes to my mind is, like, there's been all these positive pivots, but, as you mentioned, concerts, right, Patrick? I think about, the value we used to put on physical places and being with people and face to face. And I don't think anybody will deny that the pandemic has sort of like created this baseline anxiety, paranoia, maybe like tapped into our more introverted or, a little bit more withdrawn selves. And I guess I'm just wondering, are there any pivots that you're hoping won't be permanent? Like some things that you're hoping will like switch back? Um, Anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, speaking personally, I think it's just the in-person stuff. But like, I think sectorally, we're a highly collaborative sector, and having to learn how to do that on a digital medium was difficult. And it actually, to an earlier point made, it reduces sort of access to folks who don't have technology available to them, right? And so that in-person collaboration is really, really something I think people thrive, especially when we think about creative industries.
Yeah, I'll do the ones I like the best, and then I'll talk about the ones I like the least. I mean, my sweet, like, very dark background here is because I'm actually going to an in-person meeting tomorrow, and I'm in Montreal, and so I'm excited about the idea of being in person, looking across the table from people again. But I have enjoyed, I think, I'm speaking from a trade association level here, not an arts level, but we have made a lot of use out of what we've been calling the digital hallway, right? We've been able to connect with colleagues all around the world in a way that you just wouldn't be able to normally. And so I look forward to kind of normalizing a bit of that while also keeping some travel available to us all, of course. The one that the pivot that I'm most looking forward to getting rid of, though, is we do have a sense that a lot of people in the arts community, a lot of musicians specifically, they went online because they had to, but it's not the medium that they want to play. It's not how they want to present their music. And I think a lot of anguish and anxiety was exerted throughout that. And I'm really excited to hear and see and experience live music the way artists want it to be received. And that'll be that excitement I can't wait for.
Thanks to all of you. Shifting a little bit into the future, this is a bit of a big question, but how do you guys see the arts and culture sector contributing to overall socioeconomic recovery? And I think we've talked a little bit about the social change and dialogue that we've seen heightened over the past few years. Thinking both practically speaking, but also like in terms of social change and conversations. What role do you see the arts and culture sector playing in getting back to some version of healthy and happy normal?
I would call it social rehabilitation, really. I think that, we've been practicing social distancing, and, theaters practices social gathering. And I think we do need to remember how to do that. And I think it's crucial for, obviously we've all heard about and read about the mental health issues that have come about in just to create a healthy society. Arts, I think, hopefully we will come to terms with the fact that we are essential, and it's an essential part of a vital part to a healthy society. So yeah, I think that I would call it social rehabilitation. I think we're going to be a big part of helping us um, shift the anxiety that some people might have felt. 2 years is a long time, to be able to come back together again, and to be able to continue to be a source that sort of feeds the city and feeds a healthy city.
Mhm.
Yeah, speaking of anxiety, I was just at a restaurant and full capacity. Oh my goodness, that is a whole other thing. Anyway, that's a different discussion. I think for the TV, film, and commercial production industries, they're facing obviously a surge in demand in terms of wanting content. Production companies are coming into the city. Netflix, Amazon's, Warner. Sony. These are all folks that are building content, creating content, producing content. Unfortunately, we don't have the talent and we don't have the studio space. So for our sector, the real impact that's come from the pandemic, and also the attention that's come here, is building talent and future creative talent pipeline. We can actually retool and reskill a lot of folks who've been looking at shifting careers and moving into new industries, and give them access to training, to social capital, to networks that can actually allow them to thrive economically in this industry. POV works with folks who are breaking into the TV, film, and content production industries. We work with communities that are not traditionally represented, and we're working with geographically marginalized, economically marginalized, BIPOC folks. And we're working on building a whole new way to be able to build talent so that in the future, our city can become economically successful. We contribute hundreds of millions of dollars a year into the national economy. And so there's a real opportunity for some of these folks who've been left out to be able to access those opportunities and thrive, and break cycles of poverty that communities have been stuck in for years and years. Stepping aside that economic impact that I think our sector can have, there's the more obvious one, which is the storytelling, the narratives, a lot of the messages that have been shared about communities that shape our cultural understanding of those communities, and our prejudices and our stereotypes and our biases. That all happens because the content and the stories that are being told aren't being told by folks from those communities. And so what an exciting opportunity for us to now use this to say, hey, let's build some technical talent, but at the same time, let's also shift towards hearing stories. And we're starting to see this in very small ways, at least in front of the screen, in terms of representation. What POV is doing is working with folks behind the camera and behind the screen, so they can control the type of content that's being funded, the type of content that's being approved, the scripts that are being written, the type of actors that are being picked, and and so on. So really, I think, when we move towards the recovery, and even if we look at the last pandemic, content creation and content was a big part of getting those stories of marginalization. What are the communities who are being left behind from the pandemic? Who are the ones that are benefiting? Those stories need to be told, because it's important as we start to think about what recovery and rebuilding looks like.
Totally agree. Thanks, Bijou. On that same similar topic, thinking a little bit about economic empowerment, and I think there's a lot of people who are in the sector, but they are struggling, and it can be demoralizing. But, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that today's International Women's Day. And I think people are pretty aware, hopefully pretty aware by now, that the pandemic has had disproportionately negative impact on women in particular. And I think some people are even referring to it as the she session. And, I think that's across many sectors, but maybe we can talk a little bit about the arts and culture sector. And do you see there being work that needs to be done to, for women in particular to recover from the she session, and how we can just generally break the bias related to women in the industry, and just help uplift women in arts and culture?
We made a change actually through this pandemic. The theater industry often has 6-day work weeks for actors. We work Saturdays. It's just been a thing that we've done for far too long and just have not questioned. And of course, as you know, we've been speaking about, this pandemic has given us the time to reflect, and has given us the time to understand how disproportionately women who don't have childcare and who are responsible for taking care of the kids are being left out. And so that's something we shifted. Now we moved to 5-day work weeks, and we just started rehearsals 2 weeks ago, and it's a game changer. And it's a small thing, but it's as we know, it's incredibly becoming more and more difficult to live in the city, and especially with childcare. And it's just something that we have to start thinking about more. Just how we embed it into the workflow a bit more. Specifically with theater, because we have 6-day work weeks and 12-hour days in tech and everything else. It's just that it was built for a particular type of person to thrive. And we just have to we are, I think this pandemic has given us a time to stop and think about the practices that are actually harming our communities and affecting us disproportionately. And so that's one way. Of course, childcare is a big piece. But also just the awareness, the numbers that are coming out about jobs and who's actually re-entering the workforce. The numbers between men and women it's really alarming. And I think it's, again, not unlike BLM, people are starting to have the time and space to look at that. And it's just helping us start larger and deeper conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, during the beginning phases, we did some research as well on, hearing from artists specifically about, pre-COVID and during COVID. And yeah, you don't have to dig very deep before you hear that the live space is a pretty hostile spot for women. We would hear this on, when we were promoting copyright and the sort of anti-copyright people. Copyright is the key to making sure that people get paid when their music is played. But we would often hear from anti-copyright people who were like, no, touring's the answer. Touring's really hard on women. Touring's really hard on family. Touring's very hard on going to these places that may not have a women's, dressing room, or may create some really challenging aspects in terms of band dynamics and stuff like that. So we're really hopeful. We know a lot of thoughts gone into this. We know that we're gonna have another Allies in Action panel at the Junos, where a lot of these issues are going to be talked about. We're really hoping that the space that was held during COVID will continue to be held in a post-COVID world.
Mm-hmm. Bijou, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, and I'd say in content production, by and far, I'd say, women are a group that is left behind in many ways, and more particularly, women of color, Black women, Indigenous women. I think in certain subsections of the sector, I would say white women and men probably have some level of parity, especially when we're thinking about commercial. But again, when you deep dive, whether there's racialized folks in those groups, it's harder and harder to find. And so what we've recognized is that we need to sort of build in social supports alongside training and development that can help to complement their training. And so, instead of traditional pathways into learning how to build, to become a production person, we offer non-linear pathways. So you can access training for limited times, deal with your real life situations, but then not lose your place when you come back, because now all of a sudden you've been away for X amount of period of time. We're building that expectation into our programming and our training as a way to work with employers, because everyone that goes through our programming at the end of it gets a paid job with one of our production partners. And so what we work with them about is, look, we need to be able to create a more inclusive environment for folks who are coming, from these communities, and especially when we're talking about women who have to have whatever the situation, there's multiple scenarios that I don't want to delve into, but we can accommodate that by putting in social supports and putting in cultural supports that are relevant to those groups. And so that's one step I think we're taking, and certainly I think encouraging more folks to come forward, especially amongst Black women in post-production, like editing and stuff. There are I can probably think of 3 or 4 on the top of my head in all of Canada, which is like, what's going on? And when you start to engage with them, and we have been, and we've been speaking with, organizations like Black Women in Film and the Oya Media Group, and we're starting to learn and understand the barriers that they're facing as Black women that are entering the space. Like, can they occupy a post-production suite with the white male and sit there for 14 hours editing a film? Like that's a real barrier, right? And that prevents women of that community from entering that industry, because that's a fear they have to deal with. So maybe in the very rudimentary level, we don't think about it, but as we dig deeper, we started to see these sort of, our research started to point towards these little things that are simple solutions that we can fix that can actually increase access to those communities. So we're starting to understand that, and we're very much in the early stages of it. And what's exciting is all the organizations in our space that are doing advocacy work have really put attention on the fact that there is underrepresentation of women, even as the higher up we go. So, the decision-making rooms, there are less and less women. And there's tons and tons of research that say the more women that are up there, the more inclusive those sectors, those companies, those organizations will be. So it's actually, and quite frankly, also quite competitive. And so it's actually to our economic benefit to increase this access. And so we're making a business case. And I think, for a long time, diversity has been addressed as sort of a number, like, you're not diverse. Oh, great. I'll hire Bijou. Great. Here's the checkbox. I'm diverse. But that's the response to problematizing diversity, right? But instead, if we problematize access, we can actually think about what are the barriers that are preventing diverse folks from accessing economic opportunities, and then diversity becomes a result or an outcome of increasing access. So it's also shifting the problem and tying it into a practical way where industry, or community both feel they're being empowered by that process. And I think advocacy certainly is important, but at the same time, we need to manage expectations with industries and employers who are looking to welcome these communities into those spaces. And that certainly goes for women, especially with some of the sort of reasons that others in this have just shared.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for all of that. I think what's often not talked about is like the role of those with privilege, those who are overrepresented. The other side of it is like yielding your positions, yielding your platform, like giving up in some ways some of that space to other people. It's not only just about trying to cram more people, but some people have to maybe step off the top step a little bit. Just putting that out there. But to move on to talking about barriers, I think we're all, very aware of, rising unaffordability in the region. And I'm just curious, how concerned are you guys about the impact of that on the sector in the GTA? Like the cost of not just goods, but space and housing and all of that. How do you foresee that impacting the sector?
I mean, it's definitely a major issue where we are, it's on a practical level. We are losing many artists who can't afford to stay in theater and live in the city. It's really affecting also, I would say, Canadian talent, because if you're not in the big commercial house and you're trying to produce new original work. But then you also have this added cost of, lighting instruments that are now tripling in cost, and goods that are, that used to not be, the bulk of our expenses. We're shifting budgets now, and it's increasing. And then actually the biggest things, we can't actually anticipate what is coming next. So it's definitely affecting, especially the smaller theaters. But I think also our ability to take risks, which of course is really important for us as, especially for the large scale theaters that, didn't traditionally do original work. And that's something that's really important, especially as we're looking at more newer writers and female writers and all these initiatives that we're taking so that we can shift the landscape. But if we can't take those risks, that's scary.
Yeah. And Patrick and Bijou, I don't know if you have any comments to add to that, but maybe as a corollary to that question, we kind of know the issues, but what do you think rising leaders, we have a bunch of, rising leaders here listening in, what would you say to them in terms of how they can help, address these issues, not just affordability, but just generally helping to advance the sector and make sure that it continues to be valued and invested in the region.
Yeah, I this one's yet to be proven, but I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that some of the administrative managerial lessons of the pandemic in terms of work from home, a broader understanding of family, a broader understanding of like productivity over place. I'm really hopeful that in a bunch of organizations, those ideas will kind of thrive and continue, because in that case it'll actually be a lot easier for new creators who are maybe at the beginning of their career, who are who once upon a time felt like they could only hold down a bar job while also pursuing their art, will actually be able to come work at a Music Canada, come work at at a collective, come do that stuff, be a creator in these spaces. And in that way, they'll be able to share both their artistic, creative skills as well as whatever educational or experience skills they have as well. And then it will be okay when they need to take Thursday off because they have a huge show Wednesday night or something like that, which in the before times would have just been like, well, no, we can't have you in this, Monday to Friday job. But I'm hopeful for that. And I hope future leaders kind of keep that space open as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say using your platform to bring attention to the issues is important. Art and culture is a critical part of any society. It's not just about financial structure and governmental structure. Art actually creates access for storytelling, narration, but also it helps to shape the cultural view, the images of our identity, that is being seen outside of us, right? And so I think as leaders, what we can do is to really bring attention to that issue and to make sure that the dollars that we're using, we can leverage that to make change happen. And what I mean by that is, I work with commercial production companies, and commercial production companies get clients, and those clients sell products to consumers. And consumers can say, I'm not going to get this product if it's not representative of this type of community or society that I want to live in. And that can happen at an individual level, but certainly at an organization, a lot of organizations over the BLM, which I'm still looking to see if that'll hang around, have launched, started off with the Black Square and then the D&I and inclusion committees and all of that stuff, right? So a lot of companies are investing in this stuff, right? Because they're now hiring leaders that are on this call, but also new folks entering these industries who are saying, like, it's not just about the money anymore. Like, I want to work at a place where the things that you stand for is what I stand for. And that happened because folks use their platforms on social media, had community consultations, BLM protests, et cetera, really gave folks and leaders from communities that voice, and that created that change. And so I think as leaders, we're occupying spaces oftentimes that, we might be the only person in that room that has that ability to share and say those things. The work that's happening at Civic Action is critical because of that, because I think it's allowing us to come together and talk about these important issues so that when we go back into our offices, when we're sitting with all these other folks, we can be the ones to start to say, hey, you know what, like, we should start to think about how we're going to be more inclusive and what that actually means to be equitable and what anti-oppression actually looks like for an organization, company, charity, music, theater, whatever we're doing. So I would say that's where leaders can really play a part. And for folks that are feeling like, hey, that's not really my thing to like jump on and do something like that, go online, blog. There's social media right now where you can literally sit behind a blank screen and get your voice heard. So that is also an important avenue because it does bring a lot of attention.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for that. We probably should look to take a question from the audience, but maybe before we do that, just one quick question. Hopefully it'll be quick. I guess, curious to know, what's your big aspiration for the sector? If you could sort of have it your way, what would be the vision of, your big dream for what arts and culture can be in this region, in the GTA? Anything
We
you
don't
want
have to
to
talk about diversity no more talking about diversity. No more panels about diversity. You know, yeah, that we actually can make real changes that are sustainable, I think, which is all the things that we're talking about right now. And that it starts to become, it means a lot of things. It's going to take an intersection of a lot of things. It's going to be an advocacy around more government support, an advocacy so that there can be more affordable tickets, so that people can actually feel ownership in these cultural spaces, and participate and demand that their voices are heard, and they're represented in these spaces. From every aspect, from our museums to our cultural spaces. The truth is, when we walk into our largest cultural spaces, we don't see that right now. And we talk a lot about seeing it in the subway, but we're not going to the subway to meet each other and hang out. It's not, we romanticize that a lot. We need to start to talk about that being a given in Toronto, in our major cultural spaces. And that's when I know I have this faith for Toronto. Some of you know, I was in the States for 10 years, and I came back because I do feel like we have that potential. I feel like we're one of the few cities that do. But it means that we have to really harness this moment where people's hearts and minds are open, and talk about real things, like Bijou was saying, beyond the diversity, and talking about access, the truth, because we know it's not an issue of people. Everybody wants to tell their stories. Everybody wants their stories to be heard and to share their voice. It's just a question of a radical gesture of inclusion and invitation. And everyone knows that it's just, they know what the history is and that they haven't been invited in those spaces. So there has to be a major shift, and a commitment to that shift. And I think when people start to believe that that shift is not just a fad or a black square, we will start to see a real shift in Toronto, and Toronto will be, you told me to be flying. I'm going all the way. I really do believe that Toronto can be a model. I think I have a lot of faith in that.
Thanks, Wayne. Bijou, I saw you nodding your head along.
It was just like, yes. No, I would love for our sector to look like the country and the city that we're in. There's so much richness and like beauty in all across our country and our city that we just don't see in the sector. And it's a shame, because that's what makes us so amazing. That's what makes Canada so unique, and Toronto so wonderful, as Wayne was saying. So I would love to see that. Also, collaboration is the new competition. I've been telling everybody this. We all work in sectors, especially, I'm coming from the nonprofit charitable side of things. It's a competitive landscape. COVID has really amplified that issue. I think we can all still address the problem by collaborating with each other more effectively than seeing each other as competitors. So I would say, I would love to see, Wayne, if we can collaborate, and, whether Patrick, we can collaborate, and, Civic Action and I already collaborate. So, and for other leaders on this call to be able to look at how do we empower each other's strengths to be able to actually address the problems that we're trying to solve, instead of trying to, hate on each other and bring each other down. I don't mean to sound so I realize that sounds so very oh, let's go, but you told me to dream big, so that's my dream.
No, yeah, I mean, there's I don't know if Toronto was referred to as the screw face capital, right? And I think I would love to see more support, for our local talent and artists, and to get over this stigma of this huge market that's just south of the border, and how it influences the way we judge our own homegrown talent, right? Patrick, did you want to add something before I go to some questions from the audience?
No, I can't top what was said. I'm gonna steal that. Collaboration is the new competition. There's 1,000 music organizations or arts and culture organizations, which is a representation of the fact there were 1,000 times where somebody said, this doesn't work for me, I got to go start my own organization. And a big part of the Music Canada broader umbrella is hey, can we get back to the 95-98% that we agree on, and put our effort there? And we'll all agree to disagree on that last 5%, because it's why somebody has a job. But there's so much work, whether it's the EDI work or just being better people work, that there isn't disagreement between organizations. So let's work on it.
Let's reinforce the good work everybody is doing.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's take a quick look at the questions. There's a question that's risen to the top. It says, how do you think the industry can work towards infusing innovative content that really highlights the cultural and diverse experiences of our communities? Because it seems really hard to get into the entertainment or art space without having a lot of existing networks, which may be difficult to access by some communities. So when you're on the outside, how do you break in? And if you're on the inside, how do you bring those communities in? Is the question.
I'll jump in with a quick statement around social capital. That's social capital. And so what we in TV, film, and content production, we did a research report back in 2019 that talked about how critical social capital is when you're breaking in. We're just in the midst of running another research project to define what social capital looks like. How do you use it? How do you access it? And then how do you actually spend it to gain economic access and career success as you're, becoming a successful creative? So I would say, right now, at least in our space, there isn't a full definition of what that looks like. I think a lot of that was created by the pioneers, the original BIPOC folks who broke in, or the original LGBTQ plus folks who broke in and made their own social capital. And the reality is that what worked for them is not going to work for somebody else that's going to try to break in. So what we're trying to do is understand the mechanics and sort of how networks, mentoring, someone championing you in the industry, especially in TV and film. If you have somebody going, Bijou is the bomb director, like it doesn't matter if I haven't done anything, I will get that project, bam, right away. And this happens very regularly, and so, but if you're a new person, especially if you're a POC or someone from a diverse marginalized community, that's not happening. They're like, who are you? So credibility, how do you establish credibility? And we have folks coming out of universities and colleges that don't have that. And so it's a bigger issue that we're trying to understand better. And I just wanted to say, like, that is something that we're working towards in our programs. We build that in by running our training program with industry. So everyone that runs our training works in the industry. And so by virtue of being in our program, they meet the future of who they're going to be hiring, and we build social capital in our programs. So additional to that, we bring together, government. I'm a big collaborator, so government, unions, industry, they're all sitting at the table all at the same time, and we'll be very clear. Look, if Black post-production folks are coming into your space, here's what they're going to need in order to be successful, and that's us defining what social capital is. Now, that's only happening in a very small scale. We're testing and we're learning, we're understanding, and I can't speak for the art sector at large, but certainly in the TV, film, and commercial production space, there is a understanding that is a very critical component to breaking in. And I'm sorry if that probably wasn't very helpful to the question.
No, it was. Wayne, Patrick, go ahead.
I have the kind of exciting news on the music front. I mean, I'm not from music. I'm from politics, and I get to lead a music organization because the music industry is growing. The commercial business side of the music industry is growing for the first time in 20 years. And so if you've got data expertise, if you've got cutting edge tech in knowledge, if you've got social media skills, if you're a entry level lawyer, like the music industry is looking for people right now, and I think that's for the first time in a lot of young leaders' lives that's the case in the music industry. So I think that's the biggest misunderstanding, is that like there are jobs that aren't holding a microphone or playing an instrument in music, and our members are the leaders in that, and I'm pretty excited about that for people.
There's sort of interdisciplinary aspects that people aren't always aware of, right?
Yeah.
Wayne, did you want to add something? There's a question that's sort of it's kind of feeds off of Patrick's, but if you'd like to add a little bit on the networking question.
No, I think it's always good. I think it was useful for you to talk about that, because I think we have to name it. It is a big part of understanding how to enter. But in theater specifically, there are a bunch of festivals. I think self-producing is the way that you're able to sort of have some autonomy in being seen in the way that you want to be seen. So the Fringe Festival, Summer Works, there's festivals to be able to be seen. And to start to get those reviews that maybe then you can start to parlay into a television and film career.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for that. Thinking Bijou about your mentioning credibility, it strikes me that like part of it is like deconstructing what we currently think of as being credible, right? And thinking of different ways people demonstrate their credibility, and taking chances on people with different backgrounds, I think, is a big part of that as well. There's an interesting question in the chat. It says, how is the Great Resignation impacting the arts and culture sector? So specifically, are you seeing people leaving the sector, or are you seeing an increase in people attempting to enter the sector? What are you guys seeing?
So there's like, I'd like to answer that question in two sort of frames. One frame is like internally within our sector, and then like external to our sector. So internally within our sector, there's a lot of movement happening, I think. I think folks are seeing opportunities, which is really exciting. Tough for someone like me who's trying to, address the lack of diversity with BIPOC folks who are very limited to begin with and are all of a sudden in high demand. You can imagine, right? Like high demand, low supply, simple math. So, as a charity, it's really important for me to be able to like work on systems that are actually addressing that problem. And so it kind of like validates our what we're trying to do. So it's kind of a nice thing in one way. Outside of the industry, as Patrick was mentioning, the TV, film, and content production industries is getting huge. We're building 1 million square footage of studio just in Toronto. So the construction trades have boomed, and so people from construction are coming into TV film because it's better work environments, better pay, and they can it's a lot more like they can actually pick jobs because there's so much demand. People who are makeup artists, that are not coming into our industry because there's a big demand for makeup artists on sets. People who are drivers for Uber are coming and driving for productions now, right? And making $500-600 a day for doing that, right? So because the industry is so economically lucrative, I think it's been drawing a lot of talent from different sectors. And quite frankly, we don't have a lot of barriers in terms of access to those opportunities if you have the right skills. So an organization like BOV can kind of put you through, we stripped apart the roles and said, okay, here are the actual technical skills you need. All the rest of this is just like stuff you can learn on the job, things like resiliency, social competency. We'll embed some of that into our training. But we put people on set and they get drawn by how amazing the industry is, and how much there is to do and how broad it is, that they end up navigating into different paths. So they might begin being a grip, and now they're an account executive for a production house, or a production coordinator for a production office, right? So opportunities are immense, and it's only growing. So I think it's a really exciting time, and to be a part of the industry. There's a labor shortage, there's a demand, and there's an opportunity for skills redevelopment and retooling that all come together right now in our industry to make it very exciting to be a part of it.
Mm-hmm. Good for the audience to know. There's some opportunity there. Wayne, Patrick, what about theater and music? Are you seeing? Well, Wayne, I didn't know that theater had a 6-day work week. That's just. We're on to 4-day. We're trying for 4 days now, right? You guys are behind. So I guess my question is,
an ancient practice.
the demand. I think the Great Resignation is really about like work-life balance and workplace culture and all that is at the heart of that. Are folks in theater, are you seeing culture shift? Are they demanding different types of work arrangements? Or are you seeing like tons of people who are now discovering like, my passion has always been for theater and I want to try this out and looking to get into it?
I would say there's a bit of everything. One thing that's actually I find quite inspiring is that people are very are really coming to the table with the values that they're looking for in an organization now more than ever, and talking about the values of the company, that how we express our values. Like it's a big discussion in the cover letters. It's a big discussion in I think it's about work-life balance, but it's also about like social justice, or just how they see a cultural institution's role in a city, which has not always been the case. It's very much about like, here are my top skills, and I think that has to do with people making a decision that actually they're going to work where they feel like those values are reflected, and that and the work-life balance. Yeah, so I think there's just a new prioritization in the way that people are seeking work that I find I find it really inspiring because at least you understand what people are looking for, and you have a sense that they're if you can meet their demands, and yeah,
Mhm.
people feel more empowered. I would say.
Yeah, it's great. People are self-advocating more, I think, now more than ever. Um, we have a few minutes left, and there's a question here that I'm dying to ask. And I think it comes back to promoting what's here, our local talent. Somebody's asked this panel to shine some light on the amazing talent in the sector. And to maybe tell us a little bit about a regional based artist or creator who you think more people need to know about, who deserves some more attention. And I'd be curious to know anyone in your networks you'd like to, just like put out there.
Which one?
Now you're thinking, oh my God, how do I choose?
All of our alumni, like, just go to POV Film on Instagram, and we have two of them that were on TIFF last year, Tyrone Tommy and Jordan Oram, Sasha Lee Henry. These are all like upcoming creators. Like, they're gonna blow up. They're gonna be big time. We have some really cool partners. Like, there's an agency we work with called Peak. Imad El Sheikh and Sarah El Gamel are very in this industry and popping, doing some big things. Our creative director Naftali McKinley came out of New York after 10 years like you, Amy, and is now here in Toronto leaving his mark. He's got some really cool things coming down with POV. Yeah, so lots and lots and lots of people. But check out our website, povfilm.org, or Instagram at povfilm, and you can see some of our alumni and films. All of our folks create films, so there's lots of stuff there that you can check out.
Thanks, Bijou. I think Rebecca shared the link to the Instagram in the chat, so thanks for that, Rebecca. Wayne, Patrick?
Yeah, I think I would plug. I mean, we also have a pretty intense program. It's a paid training program called the Academy. It's Soul Pepper Academy, where it's a paid program for a year, 6 months. It's actually how I first connected with the company 15 years ago. I was an Academy member, which actually applications are closing March 14th. But I would say the alumni, which you can find on the website, and also, talking about initiatives. And we started a 6-woman writing initiative that came out of just wanting to highlight and bring awareness to the statistics that came out a couple of years ago around the 34% of women are being produced on the stages versus the counterparts that are much higher. And so we have some initiatives of where we're commissioning women who really deserve to be on all of the large scales across the country and are not. And we have Erin Shields, Sandra Caldwell, Phelan Johnson, Kat Sandler, Hannah Moskovich, and Trey Anthony. And I mean, they should be household names, and they should be also moving in television, film. So, but yeah, they're there. You could read their bios on our website. And yeah.
Thanks for that, Wayne. I'm excited to get back into the theater myself, in the
April
audience.
14th, April 14th, we open.
Thanks. Patrick, any last words before I close up?
I mean, I just, we talked about recovery off the top and where we're headed. I mean, I'm just so excited for people to go to live shows, and not just the really big ones, but the little ones too. The smaller the venue, the more important it is to pay for your ticket. Get a drink, buy a t-shirt, and then follow listen for what you like. Follow them on Spotify, follow them on YouTube. Give them your email address so they can let you know where they're going. That's, post all of this, there's going to be a real opportunity for people to really connect with their fans in a way that I think is going to be craved by both ends of that relationship, right? For the artist to get out and touch their fans, and for the fans to get out and reach out to their artists. So I'm excited about that. I'd encourage everybody listening to get excited about that as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks. I'm so happy to end on that optimistic note. There's a lot of work to be done, of course, but it's just great to hear how the sector is thriving in this region. And I'm so thankful that you could be here with us today. And I think, Sarah, I think you were supposed to have the last word, so I won't take it from you.
No, Jamil, there was nothing further on my end. This has been
Okay.
such a phenomenal conversation. I mean, I'm born and raised in Toronto and have really missed going to launch parties and music. And it's really nice to see the King West scenes just like sparking up again. So I'm very excited to see everything that you've mentioned, all of you, come to fruition.
I'm so happy to have met all of you. And I wish you guys the best of luck in this 2022 as we come out of this.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me here and for allowing for this conversation to happen. Hopefully more to collaborate on in the future. We're having a big event at TIFF in the next couple of weeks. We'd love to have some of you folks there to come and check out our work.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thanks,
I also
everybody.
love to plug.
Yeah, go for it.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, lady.
No, I was just gonna say April 14th, Pipeline is our next show that we're opening with. So yeah, I would love Bijou. You will change contacts and we'll go to each other's events.
Yes, done.
Maybe you guys share with the ELN organizers and Rebecca, like if there are these dates, maybe they can be sent out to the audience so folks don't forget about it. Awesome.
And thanks for doing such a fantastic job moderating, Jamil.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. No, great.
It's been so nice to get away from my 1.5-year-old for the evening and have adult conversations. So thank you. Have a great one, you guys.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Take care.
Everyone.
Bye.